Hello, internet stranger. In this video, I wanted to show you two chess games that I played somewhat recently, where my opponent tried to deploy the fried liver attack against me, and I tried to respond with the traxler counterattack. Now, both of these games were daily games. I haven't played a ton of those on chess.com, and so my elo in daily is still lower than in rapid. Recently, I've been playing more daily games, and my elo in daily has been climbing quite fast. But the reason I'm mentioning all this is that the traxler counterattack is essentially a gambit, and if your opponent knows how to play against it, they'll be better off. And the risk of playing the traxler in daily games specifically is that even if your opponent doesn't know the relevant theory well, they can just look it up. And depending on what resources they use, this might not even be against the rules for daily games on chess.com, which apparently allows certain types of external resources. So my point here is that I probably wouldn't use the traxler at like above 1000 elo maybe in daily games. With shorter time controls, it's probably still going to work most of the time, even at somewhat higher level, because white really needs to know the theory well to avoid getting in trouble. You can't just rely on natural-looking moves. Okay, without further ado, let's jump right into the first game. So, naturally, I'm playing black, e4, e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop to c4, knight to f6. And so here, my opponent decides to start the fried liver attack with knight to g5. Now, in case you don't know, the idea here is that this knight and this bishop are both eyeing the f7 square. And the plan is to take with the knight, forking the rook and the queen. This is a very popular idea. I myself have played usually a more delayed version of this multiple times. The mainline response from black is d5 and then knight to a5, counterattacking this bishop. But the more risky yet more fun alternative is to play the traxler counterattack. And so in this position, I'm facing this dilemma, right? Do I play solid? Do I play the main line? Or do I have some fun with this high-risk, high-reward traxler escapade? And at that moment, I actually had never played the traxler in a real game before. I had studied it, I had done drills, but I'd never had the guts to actually play it against another human being. For one thing, I wasn't sure I would remember all the relevant theory in a rapid game, and like I already said, I hadn't been playing a ton of daily games. But ultimately, I decide, YOLO, let's go for it, and I play bishop to c5. And you can see already that the evaluation bar goes down immediately for me, because again, it's a gambit. And so now I'm sitting there waiting for my opponent to make their move, thinking, will they even know what I'm trying to do here? I mean, theoretically they should, because if you have studied the fried liver attack, you must have also heard about the traxler response to it. But it's still possible that they don't know it, and or that they are thinking that I do not know what the fried liver attack is and how to respond to it. Lots of pragmatic reasoning here. Now, the best response for white here is to abandon the plan of taking on f7 with the knight and creating this fork. But instead, the best move here is to take on f7 with the bishop, and then get out and be happy that you're a pawn up and your opponent can no longer castle. Now, there are still some tricky lines there. It's still not over. You still need to know how to play here as white, because I still have some tricks up my sleeve. But if white knows what they're doing, they're just going to be better. So does my opponent know this? Do they know that they now should be taking on f7 with the bishop? No. They won that fried liver. They just love organ meats, I guess. Just like me. And like late great Hannibal Lecter from Silence of the Lamb, the sacrificial lamb of bishop to f2, check. And thus the traxler begins. Now, white is still better, as you can see, in that there are still lines where white can still be better. But at this point, you just absolutely need to know them, as they're quite non-trivial. Once again, if you just play naturally, you're going to lose. First things first, you shouldn't be taking this bishop. Does my opponent know this? No. And they clearly didn't look it up either because they go ahead and take the bishop, and that's a mistake. And you can see that the evaluation is now equal. And that's because with the best play from both sides, it's a draw. If white plays all the best moves and creates enough counterplay, black can just force a draw by perpetual check. And I have drilled these lines, so I'm already quite happy. I know that I should at least be able to draw this game. So now I play knight to e4 check, and basically it's open season on white's king. And that's the whole point of the traxler. Expose white's king, hunt it down, and depending on how things go, black might checkmate white within just a few moves, or at least win a lot of material, and like I said, worst comes to worst, force a draw. Now, if I recall correctly, the two moves that don't immediately lose for white are king to f1 or king to e3. Both look quite natural, so there is a high chance white might play them. It doesn't mean that they know the correct follow-up, though. King to e3 is played, and now I play queen to h4. Now, this is not a check, so at this point, white might be thinking, oh, black is an idiot. They went on this Hail Mary attack, but they're no longer checking me, so I'm just gonna go ahead and take this rook, just like I originally planned. I still want this liver, but you can't eat this liver anymore. This liver has been poisoned. It has cancer. Don't eat it. Be like Garrett Jacob Hobbs. Put the cancerous liver back. I mean, don't be like Garrett Jacob Hobbs. You'll get shot. Anyway, in this game, my opponent goes ahead and takes the rook. And you can see that it's a massive blunder. The best move, the only move in fact here that doesn't lose, is pawn to g3. Everything else loses, but you gotta know it. Now, you'll notice that I have mate in 4 on the board. But spoiler alert, I didn't actually find it. I got nervous, I kind of got cold feet, and I decided to first just win some material back and then continue to chase white's king. I do play the best move next, queen to f4 check, but when the king steps away, and there is in fact mate in 2 on the board, which by the way, I've even seen this line before, like this exact sequence with this exact mate, but I'm just a little nervous. And the first thing I see is this fork, and so I played. Because I don't want white's queen to get involved. Even though it can't, it's too late for white. But I get scared for some reason, I don't know why. So I take their queen, they take my horse, and then I continue harassing their king. And again, neither of us play all the best moves, but eventually I corner white's king, and I checkmate him on the side of the board on move 16. So even though I didn't play perfectly, I still won, and I had a lot of fun with this game. Yeah, it was messy, it was chaotic, but it still kind of shows the power of the traxler. Next game was quite different. So again, obviously I'm playing black. We once again get to this position where, my opponent prepares to open that bottle of a nice Chianti, has a plate of fava beans ready, and I once again deliberate a little bit about whether or not I should be playing the traxler in a daily game. But eventually I go ahead and play bishop to c5. And my opponent plays bishop takes f7. And I'm like, okay, they do know how to play against the traxler. But oh well, I knew what I was doing. We'll have to play chess now. But remember, white still needs to know what to do after they take the f7 pawn with the bishop. And the first thing you need to do is to get out with the bishop. After black moves their king, and e7 is the best square for the king in this position, by the way. And there are 3 squares that the bishop can in principle go to. So which of these squares do you think my opponent retreats their bishop to? Well, presupposition failure. They castle. And I honestly don't know why. I don't want to speculate too much about their mental state at that moment, but I'm wondering if what happened was, now that I just moved my king, therefore losing the right to castle, They castled just to rub it in, just to show that they can. But I don't know. Well, whatever their motivation was, I play h6. And now they're gonna lose either this knight or this bishop. They choose to save the horse, which the computer thinks is correct, although the computer wants them to put this horse in a different square. And I guess that makes some sense because even though taking this knight would have doubled my pawns, that's actually not that bad for me, I don't think, because then my rook here would have had this open file, and I'm not castling anyway, so my rook here would have been quite happy, I think. But also putting this knight back here is still quite good because it's going to help defend against the attack that I'm going to start building immediately. And that's another thing. Not only is white down material, they're behind in development. They've only developed a knight and a bishop because they wanted that fried liver, and they lost the bishop. So I have all the initiative now. I take the bishop. They go rook e1, possibly to defend the pawn on e4, but also possibly to create this potential escape route for the king in case I get to actually have this big attack on the king side. We push some pawns, I develop my bishop to c6, and I'm already starting having thoughts about maybe sacrificing this bishop to open up white's king. They go knight to c3, I go queen to d7, creating this battery here. White goes d3, and I deliberate for quite some time about whether or not I should in fact sacrifice the bishop, because I don't see an immediate mating sequence after that. And turns out there wasn't one. But because I'm up material due to my opponent's mistake earlier, and because I have this lead in development, I decide to go for it and strike while the iron is hot. And lo and behold, it's a brilliant move. Look at that. And I'm still even up 1 point of material after all this because I got 2 pawns here for a bishop. And while there is no forced mate yet, now my queen is an absolute beast here on h3, completely paralyzing white's king, eyeing this knight here, you name it. White goes bishop to e3, and so now we have these 2 bishops staring at each other. But I don't want to take because I don't want this pawn here. And I also don't want this to open up and for white pieces to get some mobility here. I also kind of don't want to lose my bishop because I like it that it's staring down this diagonal. But if I am going to lose it, I prefer for white to take me, and then I'll have a pawn here on c5. Either way, I leave the decision to white, and I just go knight g4, adding another attacker here. My opponent goes queen e2, and I think the idea was to defend f2. I then go knight to d4. I'm attacking the queen and the knight, and I'm preventing this bishop from taking my bishop. And I calculated a couple of sequences here. One of them included white taking with a knight. And then I thought I would have this fork. And white does take with a knight. The issue is, sure, I do have this fork, but I also have mate in 2 now, because this knight used to guard this square, and now it no longer does, and my queen can come in, and after the king steps away, it's checkmate here. But because the first thing I saw was this fork, when white took with the knight, I went for the fork. A pattern seems to emerge in these 2 games. Now, the best move for white here, of course, is save the bishop, move it here, so that my queen can no longer go to h2. And of course, I'm going to eventually bring a rook here, and something's going to give, but at least it would no longer be mate immediately. So, which of these pieces do you think my opponent saves? Presupposition failure. I cannot, for the life of me, explain the move my opponent plays next, other than they just got tired of this game and decided to commit suicide on the board instead of resigning. They play Queen f1. It's like the queen could no longer watch her subjects being slaughtered. And she said, "You want the king? You can have the king." And she stepped back to stand next to her king. She put her hands on his shoulders so he could not move, and she looked my queen dead in the eye, and she said, "Finish him." Top 10 anime betrayals. And my queen did finish him. You see, by moving their queen to f1, my opponent drew my very scattered attention back to my attack here. And I did see mate in 1. I mean, look, I don't know, maybe they were actually offering a queen trade, who's to say? Either way, I won. My opponent did not play a good game by any means, and I screwed up a bit at the end as well. But the take-home point is still the same. If you are a fried liver aficionado, and I mean, who's amongst us, you gotta learn about the traxler counterattack and how to play against it. Beyond just, oh well, I need to take with the bishop now. And that's all I have for you for today. Bye!